Hi, everyone. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Katarna. Welcome to the Exemplary Catholic Leader series. I have a special guest today, Kylene Wesner. She's the creator of something very interesting. Listen to this, the Trace Your Faith Around the Church Catholic Scratch Art Book. And this is a product that Kylene has invented. She has a company called Epiphany Catholic Co, which I know you should look up, and we'll talk about that near the end of our presentation today. But Kylene, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Henry. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great too. Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you, and looking forward to hearing some of your story, particularly about that Scratch art book. So let's start with Kylene, the faith. Where are
Mhm.
you in the faith? What's your faith journey? People are always interested to know that about our guests.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating for each and every person, their faith journey. So I'm actually a convert to the faith. I have been Catholic since 2011, the Easter of 2011. So it's
God
been
bless
it's been
you.
a little bit, yeah, a little chunk of time. I met my now husband a week after he converted and became Catholic. So we're both converts. And it was about a year after I met him that I started going, year and a half maybe, to RCIA class and joined the faith. Yeah, so I'd been I'd grown up in the church, in a church, right, a Protestant non-denominational church. But I had
Hmm.
never actually been baptized. I actually wasn't baptized until I was like 21, 22 years old at another non-denominational church. My mom was getting baptized again because she was sprinkled as a Methodist and didn't think it was enough. And so she was doing it again.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just at this non-denominational church. And so I finally got baptized in my early 20s. But I was still not feeling it, right? I had had this moment when I was 8 years old where I was at a church camp, and they're like, just say the Jesus prayer and then he'll be your Lord and Savior. And so I did that, and I was so excited. And then after that, like, we went to church and whatnot for a few more years, and then we moved and quit going to church really until I was in high school again. So kind of during those formative years, which was interesting. And then in college, not so much, right? Just really did more of I always considered myself a Christian, but wasn't going to church regularly and those sorts of things. And then when I got back from college, started going to church regularly, but once again in the non-denominational churches. And just never felt any peace, right? There was always these questions that I couldn't find the answers to, and it just didn't feel like I was, getting there, right? Like, I'm sinning, but like,
Yes.
so I tell God I'm sorry, and like, so what? Like, it still doesn't feel like, I don't know. I just couldn't find the peace, that hole that God's supposed to fill, right? That I was looking for. And so when I met Brad, we started going to Catholic Mass. I was still going to Protestant churches too. And at first, of course, I didn't like the Catholic Mass either because it just didn't make any sense to me, right? Because I just didn't know anything about it. And so after going for a while, and then I moved right after I met him, I moved like a month later and went to DC for 6 months. So I was in Indianapolis then, moved to DC for 6 months to do an internship. And it was during then that I read the book Rome Sweet Home by Scott Hahn, a
Yeah.
classic favorite, right, from a lot of converts. And I was just like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I felt lied to my whole life. And I was like, how come nobody told me, right? And so that kind of then just led to me diving deeper into the faith and then becoming Catholic.
It sounds like, maybe it's the intellectual approach that came to you. Some
Yeah,
people who we interview tell us that they had that, they got knocked off their horse on the way to
right,
Damascus, so to speak, and then
right.
others come to the intellectual approach. So yours is kind of the intellectual approach, I think. Would that
Yeah,
be fair?
yeah. So I was just like, I was looking for home, right? That peace in that home, and I was just not finding it anywhere. And so yeah, it was through reading and books and knowledge, yeah, that I kind of came into that.
That's great. That's great. Well, so you've become, I'll just ask you one more question. They say that converts to the faith are more zealous. Now, that's an unfair question, but what do you think about that? I mean, we often find that there's a real passion and commitment for the faith from someone who's converted, let's say in adulthood or later on in life. Would that be true? Is that something that you see?
A lot of times, yes. I think it kind of depends on the reason that people convert and if they sort of stay the path. But I feel like if there's a lot, like you're losing stuff, or there's something that you're having to give up to really come to the faith, then I mean, you're spending a lot of time with God reflecting and asking him, is this the path that I'm supposed to be coming on, right? In order to find you. And when you get that confirmation that this is what I want you to do, even if it's going to cost you your family, your friends, whatever it is. I mean, and luckily that hasn't happened to me or Brad per se, right? It does
Hmm.
make family events a little bit more challenging around the
Yes.
like Christmas and stuff, because we're always going to mass and they're not. And they may go to church or they may just watch it on TV or whatever it is, right? And so it makes it challenging in that regard. And there is some fear, especially when you're doing it when you're younger. Because I was in my mid 20s by then, that that your parents aren't going to approve, and what are they going to say, right? At least in my case. And so yeah, I mean, I think that that's part of what makes converts maybe more zealous to an extent, or even maybe if you have a reversion. I feel like it's kind of that post, I'm going to say 25 just because that's typically when all of our brains, is formed, but you've put a lot of thought and a lot of skin in the game to become Catholic or to revert back to your
Yeah.
Catholic faith. And so I think
Yeah.
that really drives that need and want to really focus on your faith and make it an integral part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. You know, in a sense, you've talked about paying some kind of a price for it, and
Mhm.
I'd like to shift our discussion for a moment then to the business. You do have a
Sure.
product, and you have a company, and you're performing a valuable service for people, Catholics and otherwise. And I'll ask you then to tell us about your business, certainly, and then are you paying a price for that, perhaps? Sometimes people who have Catholic business will say that they lose friends, or there's a certain kind of customer that will never talk to them again, that sort of thing. But tell us about your business and what are you doing with this scratch art thing?
Right. So the Catholic business, right? So it's a Catholic business, and Catholic is in the name. So if you're Catholic, you're going to be more inclined to come to it. And if you're not, maybe not. And so it kind of singles it out there. So there may be certain customers that never come around to it. Um, but in that sense, right, I'm kind of just targeting in on who's most interested in my product. So that being said, the scratch art book and the company came into existence in a really kind of, Holy Spirit sort of way. I had often wanted to start a business or have a bookstore, but I was like, I don't know how to do any of this, and had all these ideas. When you have kids, they give you lots of ideas for things that you need because there's all of these problems that you have, and you don't have a product to
Mhm.
solve them, right?
Mhm.
For instance, my daughter hates flavored toothpaste, and I literally buy toothpaste from Britain that's unflavored, right? So Amazon.
Fine. I thought
And
you were
so
going
at
to
one
say you use
point,
baking.
right. Yeah. Well, I don't think she would like that either. But
Right.
anyhow, and my son's like that too. So they have like very acute taste buds. And so they're very particular about things. And so they do not like fruity flavored any of the kids flavored toothpaste. They're like, oh. So anyhow, I've been like, well, I should start a business with that, or, whatever it was. And so, but I was like, I have no idea how to take it from here's my idea to this is a product, right? So
Mhm.
one day I was listening to a podcast by Sterling Jaquith, who does a lot of coaching in the Catholic mom realm. And especially she has one that's just for Catholic mom on business owners and entrepreneurs. And she basically just said that entrepreneurs are problem solvers. And I was like, that's what I'm supposed to do, right? Because I've had all of these things and I'm like, I like to solve problems. I like to provide solutions to problems. This is what I need to do. So I went through a few different ideas of different things. And then a couple months later, so October of last year, we were in mass, and my daughter, who was not 9 at the time, she loves scratch art books, right? So if you think of the scratch art books that you often see on Amazon or somewhere, she loves those, right? The animal ones, especially. And so she would take those to mass and she would do the scratch art, right? And I knew that she was paying attention because she would ask questions about the readings or she'd ask questions about the homily. And so it got me to thinking,
Mhm.
I wonder if there's any Catholic scratch art books out there. So when I went to go look, there was a Bible story one made by that same company. And I'm like, that's wonderful, but it's not going to last. Like she's going to end up going through that book and then we'll be done. So then what are we going to do after that? And so I just started asking people, I'm like, what do you all think about this idea? And like everybody I talked to was like, that would be amazing, right? Whether they wanted to use it at mass or adoration or waiting in line at confession, right? We wait in line for confession here for long periods of time. And so the kids often get bored, right? So we were looking kind of for something to do, and kids tend to get really engrossed in the scratch art. And it also has a lot of um, occupational therapy techniques that go along with it, like children that
Yes.
have sensory overload, children that are neurodivergent, they might be on the autism spectrum, those sorts of things. They really get a lot of benefit and ability to regulate their emotions on their own by doing what they call heavy work. And so scratch art, typically heavy work's like pushing a wheelbarrow, right? Like something like big and physical. But when you're in church or you're at adoration, you can't push a wheelbarrow, right? So the scratch art actually provides that sort of heavy work in a more confined and smaller environment because of the resistance of the scratch art, of the covering that's on the scratch art pages. It provides them this very satisfying process of removing the scratch art from, or the scratch off surface from the page to kind of reveal what's underneath.
Right. To uncover it. Mhm.
And so that's how
You
the
know,
idea came about and the company came about was
yeah.
my daughter and
But
and her need. Yeah.
it's so interesting because what you've described here is what so many in the classic startup world would say, okay, Kylene did customer discovery, she did market segmentation, she did product market fit analysis, and you did, but you didn't
Hmm.
approach it that sort of, I don't know, theoretical. You approached it from
Right.
a practical. What can I do for my family? There's a need right within
Right.
my own family. You ask your friends, and then suddenly you've come up with the product. And so how and does your market then accept that product for those same reasons? I guess they must.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of people do that. So some of them might use it at mass, right? So if you have children that often have like meltdowns or like they get bored or they're fidgety or those sorts of things, they might use it at mass. Other people use it more at adoration, right? So they've got something to do while they're at adoration that's engaging and it's faith-based, right? So the topic of this
Mhm.
particular book, our first one that we've got, is around the church. So it's items that are all around the church or a chapel that you would experience either during mass or that you would just see by visiting a church, either your home parish or if you're out traveling somewhere, you could use it as well. And you just are learning about the different things about it. And so while you're at adoration, or you're waiting in line for confession, or you're just out at a restaurant, or you're at home, right? I've had people write in after they got the books and say, oh my goodness, my children were quiet for an entire hour while my husband and I made dinner and had a conversation. This is amazing. And I was like, that is wonderful, right? Because they just get into it. It's really kind of fun and exciting for them, but also calming, right? So they're not getting hyped up and excited about stuff. It's calming and interesting, and they're learning about their faith as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. What are you finding, in business? You could say it's a startup. At a certain
Yep.
point, you'll become a growth company. But what have you learned? Cash flow, financing, product shipping, and all that. I'm just curious, what lessons you might have learned already in
Oh
this
my gosh, so
really
many
side
lessons,
gig.
right? So
Yeah.
many lessons, yes. So yeah, the financing, we did pre-orders, right? But the pre-orders were not still enough to order in the quantity that made sense to get the price point that you wanted, right? So what you learn is that in order to, like, we were going to start off with like 300 copies. It didn't make any financial sense to do that. And so um, when it comes to doing that, you have to look for financing elsewhere, whether it's, like a business loan or credit cards or those sorts of things, because we just didn't have enough for the from the pre-orders. we did, I mean, a decent job in getting the pre-orders out there and getting quite a few sold. Um, but then also the manufacturing process is a very interesting, that's the biggest
Mhm.
learning one that I kind of have taken away from it is that this idea, I reached out to manufacturers back in November of last year. I
Yes.
just now got the books like 2 weeks ago, right?
Mm.
So like there's the process of like you look and you're kind of trying to find the right manufacturer. And then it took us a while to create the book, right? So the book was not already created. I had an illustrator
Mm.
that I'm working with, and so she was working on the illustrations and I was working on the content. And this is a side gig for me, right? I have a full-time other job. And so I can't just spend all my time doing this, plus a husband and two kids, two younger, youngish kids. And so I'm working on it on the side. And so it took us until May to really get the book done. And it's 30 different objects around the church that you would see. And so she had to draw the 30 things. Um,
Mhm.
and then I had to write content for 30 pages. And then along the way, we decided, oh, we had written it basically for an 8+ crowd, but then we decided, well, the younger kids are probably going to want one too. So then we decided
Sure.
to, and the illustrator worked mostly on this, was reducing, not really necessarily reducing, I mean, a reduction in content, but also making it more age appropriate and including more sorts of games like seek and finds or find the difference in these pictures for
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
call it the junior version, the 5+. So there are two
Mhm.
versions of the book. Um, but yeah, so there's scratch art page on one side that the illustrator's working on, and then there's the content that I was working on and researching and pulling together.
Amazing. So when you do this in business, there are many people that come to us at the Catholic CEO. You probably talked to a lot of your friends and people. They'd like to start a side gig. And there's a procrastination thing, or there's all these realities that you speak about. What advice have you got for others? Would you say, yeah, do it? Or is this like, wait a minute, what would be your advice to
I
some
mean,
contemplate?
I feel if God puts the call on your heart, he's gonna, give you the skills and stuff that you need along the way. Because this has been totally, I mean, God ordained in his time, right? Like I had no idea how to manufacture a product. I happened to win a call with an email marketing person from the Self Fiat Publishing Academy, right? I signed up for that a couple years ago and won a
Yes.
call with Greg Johnson of Email Magic. And so I was talking to him about stuff and I had no intention of writing a book right then. I just thought it sounded fun. And as you can tell, I just like to learn, right? So I was like, ooh, this sounds like a good idea. I'm just going to sign up for this. So I talked to him. Well, he happens to know how this manufacturing process works and how, starting a company works with this other job that he has. And I was like, so then like months later in October, when I had that idea, I was like, so Greg, how would I do this? He's like, well, check out this book and see if this is what you're thinking. And I'm like, okay. So that's how it got rolling, right? And then we find the manufacturer, we get the book ready. And then from May to December has been a whole lot of, oh, it's going to be done. Oh, no, we've got a delay. Oh, it's going to be done. Oh, we've got a delay. And so, I mean, really what you learn is that you've got to surrender that part over to God. The timing, and his timing was perfect, right? Because I'm very busy from August to December, right? And so
Yes.
the books would come when I had certain breaks and were able to ship them out or I could handle it. So it was interesting in that regard. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth it. If God puts the call on your heart, right, he's going to give you the tools and the people that you need to do it and also teach you lots of lessons along the way with,
Mhm.
kind of
Yes.
having to surrender what you thought was going to happen in the way that you thought it was going to happen. And you learn a lot, especially if you're creating a product like with manufacturers, you learn a lot about that process along the way, and that it's typically a year process from like the time that you have an idea to the time in which the product actually comes about, especially for your first one.
Got it. So you're speaking patience, you're speaking preparation, you're speaking, building in time into the schedule. And I suppose if you have to finance it, well, then there's time and interest costs and money and that sort of thing. Is this a family business? Is the children involved? Your husband? Or is it a one woman business?
Mostly it's me. The kids test out my products, right? And my
Mhm.
husband
Yes.
advises me on things when I ask him for, I'm like, so what do you think about X, Y, and Z? But this has kind of been like my little project that I've been doing on the side. And so yeah, they've been supporting me in, allowing me time to do some things here and there. Shipping orders, right? I have friends that will come over and help, especially if when the pre-orders came in, when the books finally came in for the pre-orders, we had, a couple hundred that we had to ship out. And so
Yeah, have to hustle up and get
um
it done.
yeah, and so one of my friends came over and helped me out with that. Yeah, so that's
Mm.
yeah, it's pretty much me doing sort of like my dream. I've always had sort of this, I've always wanted a Catholic bookstore, even, many, many years ago. And so I don't have a bookstore yet, but this is kind of, similar.
The precursor. We'll look in the future for the Kylene book brand
I
somewhere along the
know, right?
line. Yeah, that's great. So tell us, Kylene, then, Catholic business, we talk about the Catholic economy, how Catholics could support each other in business. What are you seeing about that whole question? What are your thoughts about that?
I love the idea of Catholics helping Catholics build businesses, right? Because then we can create the culture that we want in those environments and hire more Catholic employees so that they can benefit from that as well. I mean, of course, we're going to have to engage with the outside culture just
Yes.
because that's the nature of things. And we don't want to be exclusive to the extent that we're kind of hiding away from the world, even though that's very tempting sometimes, especially with the way the world is going these days. But I love the idea of Catholic businesses supporting other businesses, and I love the fact that we have groups on Facebook and we've got all the podcasts and the community. And if you reach out to somebody, they're going to answer and say, oh, yeah, we could chat about X, Y, and Z, or why don't you join this group or look at this course or whatever it is. And I think the great thing about being a Catholic business owner and entrepreneur is that there is a lot of support out there that you can go to find the answer, right? If you don't have it, somebody else has probably done it before and they can help guide you along the way or show you where you need to go or answer that question just off the top of their head. So you're not necessarily having to do it all by yourself and you're not having to dig through all of the secular stuff in order
Yes.
to try to learn because some of the secular stuff is great and some of it's trash, right? And so it's just, and having to then weed through that is just extra time that you don't really have as a Catholic entrepreneur, right? Because you are trying to lead a faith-filled life, right? And making your faith a central part of your life and your family, if you have a family, right, is an integral part of your life, right? And so just being able to build each other up and to share resources and to work together and to employ other Catholics, right? Whether it's Catholic moms working part-time, doing like VA work, virtual assistant work or something like that, or whatever it is. I mean, I think it's a great model, right, for Catholics to be able to start businesses and then hire other Catholics that are looking for work but don't want the demands of corporate America, right?
Exactly. You're speaking my language because this idea of a Catholic economy where we can band together, buy together, sell together, all these
Yeah,
things, advise each other, capitalize each other's businesses,
yeah,
and we can influence the culture. Then we can resist the culture. We can make changes in the culture. So I think we're on the same page on that. Will you
yeah.
see in your business, what's the future for your business? Will there be growth in this business to the point where you'll go full time into this business? What do you see on the future?
I mean, that's the goal, right? I mean, I love this. This is the thing that really makes me excited to think about and to do. I mean, this is just one, we've got many ideas of what we're going to do for our scratch art books and different ways in which we're going to incorporate things. And so this is just the beginning of what I hope to grow to a wide variety of scratch art products as well as other items, just to help families that have, themselves or children that might need some help with some self-regulation, right? Or just want some religious-based activities or toys for their family. And we have lots of great religious toys and activities for the family out there already. So I'm looking at things that might speak to children or families that have more specific neurodiverse needs Not that it's limited to that, but just that's a very particular market that struggles a lot, especially when you're at mass or at adoration and you're trying to conform to what is, expected in those places. And it's really hard if your children are having a hard time that day or they're not interested in what's going on and what do you use to, sort of help them focus or, distract them from whatever's bothering them, right? And so
Yeah,
that's kind of my focus as to when I'm creating products, as to what I'm thinking of, specifically for those types of families. And all children and adults benefit from these too. I mean, I like doing the scratch art myself. I sometimes steal my children's scratch art books, but
yeah.
yeah,
Mom has a secret stash
that's
of
right.
scratch.
That's right.
That's great. Well, I'm thinking of one of my sisters is a music therapist, and I can
Oh,
see a connection, even though for somewhere in the future where art and music could come together,
yeah.
and so you've got ideas. I can see you're heading in the right
Yes.
direction here for sure. So, we could talk a lot more, and we're limited in our time today, of course. Where can we find you? Where can we support your work? Where do we buy your products? How do we get one of these?
So I am at epiphanycatholic.co. You don't need a www in front. It's just epiphanycatholic.co. And that's where you can find the scratch art books. You can also sign up to be an Epiphany Catholic Insider on that same web page. It's the first thing that you'll see when you go to the web page. And that's where you get alerts and sort of the insiders track to sales and new products that are coming out. I like to send out surveys and ask people, so what do you think about X, Y, and Z to kind of get people's feel for what they're looking for, what they're liking, what they're not liking, those sorts of things. And so that's where you'll find me there. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, just at Epiphany Catholic Co. is if you go and search that, you'll find me there. And yeah, that's where I'm at. And yeah, definitely I've got the books here, so I can even show you a little bit. I don't know if
Yeah,
it, well, I'd probably have to
I mean, yeah, if you
get the background off of here, but yeah.
background. But anyway, we can
Yeah.
go to the website
Yeah.
and see your products and
Yes.
things.
So
So
the
that's
website,
great.
yep. And on Instagram, there's videos of kids doing them too. And like I said, there's an 8+ version and then a 5+ version. And the 8+ is, there's just more content in there, some more reflection questions, those sorts of things. And the 5+ still has the same content and the same scratch art pages. The content is just more age appropriate and there's more games. And there's also answers in the back of the book so that everybody has the answers in case we need them. Although there is one
That's great.
question about the altar that is not in the back of the book because it's specific to the altar in the church. So only
Mhm.
the priest should know that answer, which is who it tells you to go ask.
Very That's great. I can see another version for, the serious theologian or the expert, I don't know, the senior who really understands their faith, and then you give them a complex book with all sorts of scratch art. It's very esoteric.
Right. Yeah, for
Or
sure. I like it.
basilicas, famous basilicas around the world. You can use scratch art and then you
Yeah.
discover what they are. So
Yeah,
I
that'd be fun.
it, we could be full of ideas here. So,
Yeah, I
so
know,
Kyle,
right?
yeah, thank you for being with us. God bless you, your family, and this business. I think this is great that you've done a side gig then that has great potential to be, to be a full-time business, and you're doing something. Well, you're doing God's work as well as you're making a business for yourself. So, God bless you for that. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Henry. It was great.
God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.